Today we find ourselves in the place where seduction and psychology meet to create an explosive combination, trespassing the ethical limit, exploring the meanders of the human mind. We will analyze a still mysterious and unexplored territory: dark psychology. Dark psychology is nothing more than the use of psychological strategies with the intent to manipulate or influence others in our favor. And as we dive into this world, I invite you to reflect. These 6 techniques are powerful, but they must be used ethically and responsibly. Technique 1: Subliminal Suggestion. Subliminal suggestion is based on the insertion of hidden messages or symbols in seemingly innocuous contexts. Think of how certain brands use hidden images or words in their advertisements, subtly influencing our purchasing decisions. In seduction, this could translate into the use of body language or words that evoke emotional responses, driving attention and attraction to the desired person. Subliminal suggestion, a concept with deep roots in psychology and marketing, is based on the idea that the subconscious mind can capture and interpret information that the conscious mind might not immediately notice. This technique was first explored in a significant way in the 1950s by marketer James Vicary, who claimed to have increased sales of popcorn and Coca-Cola in a cinema by inserting short subliminal messages during a film screening. Although Vicary later admitted that his results were fabricated, the idea that people could be influenced on a subconscious level gained ground. In seduction, subliminal suggestion can be used through the art of conversation and body language, inserting subtle signals and messages that can influence the other person's perception and behavior without their full awareness. For example, the use of words or phrases during a conversation to evoke positive emotions can create an unconscious association between those emotions and the speaker. The key is to be discreet and natural in application, so that messages are perceived at a subconscious level, gently influencing the person's emotions and decisions. Technique 2: Emotional anchoring. Emotional anchoring involves creating a connection between a specific emotion and an action or symbol. For example, you might create a connection between a specific touch on your shoulder and a moment of intimacy or laughter, associating that gesture with those positive emotions in the future. Emotional anchoring is a psychological technique that exploits the ability to associate a specific emotion or response with a particular stimulus or situation. This practice has its roots in classical conditioning theory, developed by psychologist Ivan Pavlov in the late 19th and early 20th century. Pavlov demonstrated that dogs could be trained to salivate in response to the ringing of a bell if this stimulus had previously been associated with food, transferring this concept to the human context and, more specifically, to seduction. Emotional anchoring can be used to create a link between a given emotion and a person's presence or words. For example, if during a moment of happiness or excitement, a person uses a specific phrase or gesture, that emotion can be anchored to that phrase or gesture. In the future, the repetition of that phrase or gesture may evoke the original emotion, creating a subconscious link between the pleasure and the person who established the anchor. In seduction, emotional anchoring can be used to create a positive and pleasurable association with one's presence, strengthening the bond and attraction through manipulation of emotional responses. Technique 3: Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation that aims to make the person doubt their own perceptions or memories. Used ethically, you may create scenarios in which the desired person questions the nature of your relationship, maintaining an aura of mystery and desire. The term gaslighting originates from the 1938 play Gaslight and subsequent film adaptations. The story revolves around a man who manipulates his wife's reality to the point where she doubts her own sanity. The technique of gaslighting consists of manipulating someone into doubting their perception, memory, or reality. In a seduction context, gaslighting might create an atmosphere of uncertainty, causing the manipulated person to question their own assessment of situations and, in some cases, their sanity. The goal of gaslighting is to weaken the victim's self-confidence, making them more susceptible to manipulation and control. This technique is often used in toxic relationships and can have devastating effects on the victim's psyche. Gaslighting, although effective, is ethically questionable and can cause significant psychological damage. Therefore, it is essential to approach knowledge of this technique with awareness and integrity, recognizing the importance of consent and mutual respect in human interactions. Technique 4: Scarcity bias. Scarcity bias is the perception that rare things are more valuable. By showing that you are a person with limited time and attention, you automatically become more desirable, as your availability is perceived as something precious and rare. Scarcity bias is a psychological principle that emphasizes how individuals attach greater value to what is perceived as rare or difficult to obtain. This technique has deep roots in human psychology and can be traced through various historical and cultural contexts, although not always labeled with this specific name. In the context of seduction, scarcity bias can be implemented by creating a perception of exclusivity and rarity. For example, a person might present themselves as someone with limited availability or an exceptionally engaging life, thus increasing their perceived value in the eyes of others. This tactic is also often used in marketing, where the limited availability of a product can trigger a buying rush. Rarity creates a sense of urgency and desire, as people tend to want what they cannot easily get. However, it is crucial to use scarcity bias ethically and honestly, avoiding manipulating or deceit, but rather using it to authentically value what one has to offer in a relationship or interaction. Technique 5. Halo effect. The halo effect occurs when our positive perception of a person in one area influences our overall perception of them. By displaying your best qualities and talents, you can create a positive image that influences how you are perceived in general. The halo effect is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when our general evaluation of a person influences the way we evaluate his or her specific characteristics. In other words, if we like a person for a particular reason, we tend to view them positively in other aspects as well. This technique originated in the psychological studies of the early 20th century, with the term halo effect coined by psychologist Edward Thorndike in 1920. Thorndike observed that when people possess a positive characteristic, we tend to assume that they also have other positive qualities. In seduction, the halo effect can be exploited by initially presenting one's best qualities or performing an admirable action. This initial positive impact can influence subsequent perception, causing subsequent characteristics to be seen in a more favorable light. It is a subtle and powerful technique, often used in various settings, such as advertising and job interviews, where a good first impression can tilt the scales in one's favor in future interactions. The halo effect reminds us of the importance of first impressions and how they can be strategically used to positively influence the perceptions of others. Technique 6. Reciprocity. The law of reciprocity suggests that people naturally feel the need to return a favor. By offering compliments, attention, or small gifts, you can create an emotional debt that the person will wish to repay. The reciprocity technique is based on the innate human tendency to want to return a favor or positive gesture. This principle is deeply rooted in human psychology and social dynamics, being present in various cultures around the world. Reciprocity has been extensively studied by social psychologist Robert Cialdini, who identified it as one of the 6 universal weapons of persuasion in his influential 1984 book, Influence. The technique exploits our inclination to want to return what we receive, creating an emotional or social debt. In seduction, reciprocity can be used by offering compliments, attention, or small favors, unconsciously inducing the person to want to reciprocate the gesture. This not only establishes a bond, but also creates an expectation of mutual exchange of attention and favors. It is essential that the initial act of kindness is perceived as sincere and disinterested to avoid appearing calculating or manipulative. Reciprocity, when used authentically and generously, can establish a positive and reciprocal connection, facilitating the deepening of the interpersonal bond. Remember, these techniques are powerful and can easily be used unethically. Knowledge of these strategies must be used with responsibility and integrity. And have you ever tried any of these techniques? Let us know in the comments.